camera going to be running for the screen, or are we keeping it off and just using it for audio purposes?
Depends on the presenter's preference.
What was the question?
For the Logitech meetup, it has the camera in it. You just want to point at the screen? Do you want the camera on?
Oh,
Or would you
Just
prefer
one.
screen share?
pointed up. Screen share would probably be easiest.
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't need to have the camera on.
That's just so we have all the options.
Yeah,
Yeah. I want to use the Logitech as the smartphone, right?
Yep.
Check 1 2 1 2.
so I'll just use your screen. Okay. Do you think they're all automatically making it? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Oh, yeah, a lot of feedback. Yeah, okay, we got it. Thank you. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, I kind of changed, so I can't sit, so I try not to distract. I realize I have to have my.
Good morning. I think so, yeah, the AD guy was just here, so we should be all
You
set.
got it, I'll put that, the trinkets on the table are for you. The little swirly thing that you guys take. And I just put a sign that sheet out here, so just please sign in, or, before you leave, or when the session is over. Thank you.
I've adjusted, but I've been here for like 15 minutes. Nikki may shut the door, so that's gonna be my point that started. I see there's a couple people on the Zoom, and I just want to make sure you can hear me. Can somebody unmute and let me know if you can hear me okay? Okay, I'm gonna assume you can hear me. And we'll let me know if they can't. All right, good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here this morning. I feel like I have a really tough act to follow being the first presentation after that very dynamic speaker this morning, which So I'm really excited to be here this morning. This is my first conference with this group, and always excited to kind of be in rooms with people that are doing really great work. As our speaker said this morning, people in the schools, in the communities, doing work for youth. And so it's always a joy to be with you guys. I work for the Department of Education, and so I work a lot with schools, but really, sometimes more from a higher level view. So anytime we get that opportunity to interact and know what's going on in our schools, in our communities, and the programs you all are doing is always really inspiring and helpful for the work that we do to make sure that we're developing things that are relevant and helpful and useful for our folks on the ground who are working with the youth every day. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Can I get a show of hands if there was anybody who works directly in schools? Okay, so a good bit of you, but I will say this presentation is definitely geared towards students and things in schools, but I think can be very applicable to in the community as well. So keep that in mind as we go through. I'll be happy to keep this informal. We'll do question and answer at the end. If you have anything you want to ask as we go on, feel free to stop. So okay, so objectives today, we're going to talk about non-academic barriers to learning that affect overall child and youth well-being. We're going to talk a little bit about the relationship between physical and mental health, how those things might present together sometimes and appear to be the same, and kind of how that looks in youth and sometimes in adults as well. I'm going to provide some Georgia Student Health Survey data. Some of you may be familiar with the Student Health Survey. It gets administered on an annual basis through the DOE. And in prior years, previous to COVID, has been a requirement of schools to participate. The last couple of years have been a little bit different because of the COVID ways that we were in schools and the questions that this asked have been relevant to being sitting in a classroom type of thing. But we did have great participation this past year, so I'm going to share a little bit of that with you guys. And then lastly, we're going to end on presenting some resources. So a lot of the work that my office does is focused on tier 1 supports, right? So prevention style programs, things for all kids, all students in all schools. We don't focus super as heavily on tier 2 and tier 3 resources, but we'll get into that just a little bit, like I said, at the end. So the office that I work in is a little bit unique to the Department of Education. We've been around since August of 2020, and it's called the Office of Whole Child Schools. And I'm sure most of you have seen this graphic. Hopefully some of you have. This is the CDC and ASCD's whole school, whole community, whole child model. And this was really created to be a framework for schools to integrate health and well-being resources and supports into the everyday school operations. You see lots of different components on here. Physical education, physical activity, nutrition, health services, counseling, community involvement, parent and family engagement, those things are huge. But I think one of the best things I like about this is the way that this entire thing, right? So we can't do any of this work inside schools without having that support of the whole community around kids. And we really focus our work kind of off of those 5 tenets in the center here: healthy, safe, engaged, challenged, and supported. And so as our office is new and we're kind of working on building resources and supports and programs that schools can then emulate that are on their own, we work across divisions as well, since most of the DOE is really focused on academic supports. But how can we integrate this kind of whole child lens into everything that we do? So as we have grown and been around for a couple of years now, we're really getting into that. We know kind of what's needed. Now we have to work on that integration piece. So in October 2021, the AAP and the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry and the Children's Hospital Association declared a national state of emergency in children's mental health, which is pretty remarkable after what we had been through with the pandemic, for these very, very large and well-recognized organizations to come out with this statement. And also, early reports during the pandemic documented a marked decline in pediatric vaccine ordering and administration, placing children and adolescents at risk for vaccine preventable diseases. So not only were we looking at mental health struggles, but also on this physical health side, lack of vaccine administration, not for COVID, but for all types of, very, very well recognized public health style vaccines that prevent everyday diseases for kids. So both on the mental health and the physical health side, we were seeing some decline as a result of the pandemic. So you might be thinking a little bit, all right, education, and now we're talking about mental health and physical health. So as schools, traditionally have been really all about the ABCs and the 1, 2, 3s, and just that education piece. Now we start to look at things a little bit differently, right? So we're looking at a whole child perspective, starting with their health. How much exercise are they getting? Are they being nutritionally nourished? Are they surrounded by a climate of positivity and purpose? Are they getting rest and being given the grace they need as kids to bounce back and just be kids? So there's a lot more to consider now, and it kind of helps to have this community surrounding schools and youth to really be able to execute these types of programs. So we have to see, before a child can learn and be successful in the classroom, are their basic needs being met? Are they getting enough sleep at night? Are they healthy? Have they been fed? So just things are starting to look a little bit different. I would say I've been at the department for almost 4 years now. And the shift that I've seen in those 4 years, I think, guys, because of the pandemic, of people just being more hyper aware now of all the resources that schools do provide, not just on an academic level, but on a non-academic as well. And if they weren't providing those things before, the capabilities that they have to be able to do that has just shifted so much. So when we think about wellness in the school environment, right, we have to think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs first. Are those child's physiological needs being met first? Do they feel safe at school and at home? Do they feel loved? And do they feel like they're in a very belonging environment? How is their self-esteem and their self-actualization? So we really can't work our way up that pyramid, right, without those basic needs. So I think this is just an important theme to remember as we move through this presentation. So what I like to say that we do at TOB and in the work that we do is we connect the dots, and that's kind of become a theme of this work. Right? There are so many great pieces of work being done, great programs, great people, great efforts across the state, in schools and communities. But sometimes connecting those pieces is hard, right? We work a lot in silos in the education space, and it's been nice to see some of that be broken down over the last year or two as we've sort of been forced in a way to work together. But all the good things that can happen after making these types of connections. And I like to talk too, a lot about this physical health piece and mental health, and not being able to see one without the other, right? Because they're so intertwined. So being able to connect these dots that we can really help to serve kids the best that we can. So I want to start by talking a little bit about attribution theory. Attribution itself is the action of regarding something as being caused by a person or thing. And attribution theory is the way that we assign cause, the way that we react to behaviors. So it's the attempt to understand the behavior of others, but we're attributing causation to our own personal feelings, beliefs, intentions, personality, or situations. So think about this graphic. Anybody seen this one before? So when you're on the right side here, or the left side, you're seeing 3 very clearly, right? We don't see how anybody would see anything different on the other side. But the person on the other side very clearly sees 4. And if you can't get over to the other side to see what the other person might be thinking, how would you be able to agree or believe what they were saying, right? So you have to think about in this situation, in order to see the other side, we have to be there. We have to put ourselves in the other person's shoes and think, okay, well, that's right, maybe this is actually what they're seeing. But it's hard when you're on the other side. So let's take, for example, this child. Let's say this child has been falling asleep in class pretty regularly. We're not really sure what's starting to become wrong. So the teacher might label this child as withdrawn, having poor social skills, or even being lazy. And in a traditional school environment, when we're analyzing behavior, we're looking at the situation in which the behavior happened, the stimulus that caused that behavior to happen, remember attribution theory, and then the environment that that situation happened in. So what was going on in the school that day, what was going on in the classroom, but we're kind of thinking isolated here. So this behavior happened, and here are the things that affected it, but we're just kind of thinking like in this box. So we might label that behavior as persistently inattentive. This child's clearly falling asleep all the time, she just doesn't want to pay attention, or maybe willful disobedience. And then we might take it a step further and say this child is having these consistently withdrawn feelings, not really interacting with peers, acting lazy. Maybe that there is something going on with her mental health. We might look at these as signs of depression and anxiety. But when we look at that behavior inside the box, what are some things that we might miss? Maybe this child has inconsistent medical care. Maybe she has a lack of socialization, thinking too about, as kids are transitioning back to school from the pandemic and what they were going through when they were outside of school or in and out of school, depending on their, the situations that their schools were in. Some isolation of some kind. Many children didn't get to see their peers during the pandemic when they weren't at school, just spending a lot of time at home with their parents or their siblings. Malnutrition, with food insecurity has become a significant problem, even greater than it was before the pandemic over the last couple of years. So has anybody asked this child if she could eat that morning? She's tired in class and that's why she's falling asleep. Homelessness, that's, coming to the forefront a lot right now with children being forced out of their homes. So, has this child had a place to lay their head at night and a roof over their head? Feelings of uncertainty. I think we're all still experiencing a lot of that right now, right? As we kind of move into this post-pandemic world, and what does that look like? And then for kids, going from having so much focus on, safety and health, and then moving back into it's everything is okay now type of environment. That's got to confuse some people, right? Especially kids. Or maybe this child's been abused and there are no physical signs of it they can't see. So these are all, not an exhaustive list, but a common list of things that might easily be missed if we're just looking at behaviors in isolation. But your perceptions create your reality. So remember we were talking about attribution and saying what you think is causing that behavior is what you're going to attribute that behavior to. So kind of challenging to think outside the box. So we have to start by looking beyond the obvious. Not just what's happening in that 5 minutes or that you're noticing that that child's falling asleep. What happened before she came to school? What happened yesterday? What's going on in her community? So a lot of this work started a couple of years ago because we got acclimated with a publication by the Children's Health Fund that was called Health Barriers to Learning. And it was a very large summary all about the health inequities that children face in disadvantaged communities. And so we've kind of taken that concept and trying to understand what that looked like in Georgia. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, but I want to share this video first before we put this out first.
Teachers know their students, but sometimes identifying an issue can be difficult if they can only see what's on the surface. So when a student misbehaves or ignores them or bombs tests when they know the answers, the reason for doing so could be very different than what they might think. It's hard to concentrate on anything when it feels like someone is jackhammering in your jaw. They might know the answer to the math problem or know exactly how to spell a word, but if everything is looking blurry or they're seeing double, it can be very frustrating. Sometimes a cough isn't just a cough, and sometimes breathing heavily isn't because a student is nervous in class. If a student is ignoring you when you're speaking directly to them, or they're just nodding their head constantly, maybe they're just having a hard time actually hearing you. Food insecurity is a reality among students in Georgia, and it's hard to do anything when you haven't had enough to eat. To help you dig deeper and know what to look for, we've created a Health Barriers to Learning and Development Toolkit with lots of resources that includes a list of extraordinary professionals like doctors and dentists and administrators and teachers like yourself who are committed to helping your students with whatever medical hurdle they may be facing. Visit gadoe.org/wholechild today.
Any of those things sound familiar to you?
Our school person, you're hungry, you can't see.
Exactly. So we defined it's health barriers to learning was the initial concept, but the more that we started to work on this and understand really what was going on in our schools, we thought it's not just barriers to learning, but if these things are persistently affecting kids, it's affecting their development too. So these are looking at prevalent and persistent conditions that when they're unrecognized or unaddressed can then cause a child to have a tough time learning and then maybe inhibit their physical, emotional, and cognitive development as well. So some things that might influence health barriers to learning and development for kids. Again, not an exhaustive list here, but thinking about healthcare access, housing, insurance status, poverty, family dynamics and stress, all these things affecting kids. Health literacy, which I imagine a lot of you are familiar with, the ability for families and kids to be able to understand, interpret, and apply health information. So these are all things that can affect a child to maybe not have these things that are going on with them through private past. Maybe they don't know how to speak up or verbalize what they're feeling. Maybe they know that they can't get to the doctor or to the dentist, so they just hide those things. So all kinds of reasons why these things can fester, but just some things to be aware of, which I know is not new information in the world. So my training is all in public health, and so when I first got introduced to this concept, this was the first thing that came to me. The social determinants of health. So what's going on in the communities that we live in, where we go to school, where our kids play, where we go to work, and how those conditions themselves just being and quality of life risks and outcomes. So to give a very practical example of that, you might have a child that lives in older housing that might still have lead in it, so from lead paint. So higher mean blood levels found in children living in homes built before 1978. This is often families who are also living in poverty. And we know that no safe blood level has been identified. So any trace amount of lead in a child's blood can affect their mental and physical ability to grow and thrive. And that's not something that typically presents. You're going to look at a child and know this child has been exposed to lead and that's what's affecting them, right? There's a lot of preventive measures that go in terms of testing, but they say that, as soon as you suspect that might be an issue, maybe it's tested. But just something that purely happens because of where this child lives, they have no control. So lead exposure is one of the common health barriers to learning and development. There are also uncontrolled asthma, dental pain, unaddressed hearing and vision problems, persistent hunger, food insecurity, behavioral and mental health problems. And then we've added language and communication difficulties. I was speaking to somebody yesterday who works in the literacy world, and there's so much work being done in our state around literacy for kids and for families, and understanding that low literacy rates also have a large effect on health and social outcomes later in life. So it kind of made sense to loop that in as not something necessarily that is directly a physical health thing, but can be linked to it very easily. So when we talk generally about health barriers to learning and development, we're talking about these things. So I'm going to share some data. This might shock some of you. It still shocks me sometimes when I read it. So children with asthma miss almost 14 million days of school annually. That's a nationwide statistic. You might have children that have asthma and you never know. There's never an interruption. They never miss school. It's very well controlled. When asthma is poorly controlled, children are more likely to visit the emergency department, be hospitalized, and miss school. And in Georgia, about 8% of children aged 0 to 17 have asthma. That doesn't seem super high, but when you look at this data, you'll see the darker shading here on the right side of the state, the greater Augusta area, and down here in Southwest, and just this bottom half portion of the state in general. So those are rates between 9 and 14%. So also high, obviously, in the Fulton-Topeka area outside of Metro. And then to take that a step further, the Get Georgia Reading campaign, if anybody is familiar, has really, really great data tools. You can kind of take physical health related things and tie them to academic outcomes. So for this particular one, we looked at asthma emergency room visits for children aged 0 to 19 and third grade reading level. So if you look at some of these communities, you can see the darker the shading, the higher the rate of ER visits for asthma. And then the dots themselves represent third grade ELA proficiency on milestones testing. So the red dots are the lowest, so the bottom 20%. So if you look in some of these, not all, but in some, you'll see dark purple and red dots. Same thing down here. So, not to say that this is causation at all, but just it's interesting to look at these things together of things that your average teacher or educator might just not have thought about these types of correlations and things. So it's really eye-opening to look at things this way.
Can I interject a question?
Oh, yeah.
Other than asthma, is there another health-related instance, it seems to affect. As is probably the top of the chain.
Yeah, no, this one is, I think, the most commonly documented. And that's sort of the issue, is that with a lot of these things, there isn't good data on them for kids. So asthma rates are easily accessible, whereas other things are not. That's a good question. So next is oral health. I'm sure everybody in the room can relate to this. Ever had a toothache or some kind of uncomfortable dental pain, and it's just like really hard to focus on anything else. So if a child has a persistent dental pain issue, they're more likely to report feeling unhappy, worthless, withdrawn, and overly sensitive. Again, we can all relate. If this is something that's going on for a while, that's going to affect our sleep, the way that kids eat, maybe them causing eventually not to come to school at all, but if they are there, not really paying attention. And again, the more that these things go on, that's going to affect academic outcomes. So in Georgia, more than 50% of third grade students have a history of tooth decay, which is pretty common. Kids have cavities all the time. But the hard thing was that 20% of that was untreated. And that's based off of data from the Department of Public Health. They're actually getting ready, hopefully in this coming school year, to do another basic screening survey for third grade that will measure tooth decay and then again the treatment level. So that data is about maybe almost 10 years old. It was supposed to happen during COVID, the second one, and has gotten delayed. So that's kind of the most up-to-date out there. Vision problems. So see some glasses in the room. I'm wearing contacts. I've been wearing glasses and contacts since I was very small. And I had a really hard time thinking about how difficult it would be to sit in a classroom and not be able to see the board. So 80% of learning occurs through visual tasks like reading and writing. I love the connections that were made last night and this morning about hands-on learning and the importance of that. But just thinking about your everyday classroom setting and being able to sit and, you can't read the board, it's going to be tough to learn. And again, vision impairment is really common, affect about 25% of students. When those types of things go persistently uncorrected, they can lead to physical, developmental, behavioral, and academic problems. And this tends to disproportionately impact children in underserved communities due to things like lack of healthcare access, lack of routine screening, lack of access to follow-up, things of that nature. A little less common than your typical vision problem or maybe dental pain. But even having minimal hearing loss can place children at over 4 times the risk for language and communication difficulties. I can't tell you how many times I've done this presentation, talked to people about this, and they have a story about a kid who was getting ready to go through the IEP process for special ed, or they were expelled from school, all kinds of things. And then they found out the child couldn't hear. You talk about it, it happens. We hear it all the time. So if a child can't hear, they're more likely to react right behaviorally. So social, emotional, behavioral problems that kids might have. And I think the numbers are around 1 in 10 kids are born with permanent hearing loss. That sounds wrong. 1 in 1,000 kids, sorry, much lower than that. But temporary hearing loss can also be caused by really common problems kids face, like swimmer's ear or the common cold. Or, now we're worried about kids wearing headphones so much, and that persistent noise exposure or trauma to the ear, things like that. So again, just something to be aware of when we're looking at behaviors. Food insecurity, when families have limited or uncertain access to enough food. We were making really significant progress on food insecurity in Georgia prior to COVID. I'm not sure what those numbers look like now. The data is a little bit delayed. But one of the other things I thought was interesting was that during the pandemic, children ages 6 to 11 experienced the largest increase in BMI for their age range. And this was mostly in children that were already in that overweight to obese range. So it just got worse during the pandemic. But when children are experiencing food insecurity, that might also look like defiant behavior or symptoms of depression and anxiety. So this is a pre-pandemic map from 2019. Where about 15% of children in the state were experiencing food insecurity. In 2021, again, we don't have specific Georgia numbers yet, but it was expected that about 13 million children across the nation were experiencing food insecurity last year. So you can see the darker Green is obviously the higher rates, so some down here in Southwest, some down here in the other corner. They tend to be on the outskirts a lot. And the orange dots are the regional food banks that are across the state. So not saying that is where food banks are, but that is where their regional hubs are located. So if you think about stress in children and youth, you might want to think about this for yourself too and how you feel when you get stressed. But a child that's distressed might complain of an upset stomach or maybe a headache or they have lost their appetite. So again, not typically something you're going to see and then think, oh, this child must be stressed, or oh, this child must be worried about something. It's looking about that student again, thinking, okay, this child is tired and sleeping in class, but why? Right? What are the reasons? What's going on with her? Is she just tired, or is there something else going on? Can she not see? And now she's like, well, I guess I'll put my head down because I can't see the board anyways. So what if that child is hungry or had cavities or had hearing loss? We wouldn't know unless we asked. So looking at some of these things a little bit differently, now that we know what we know, the child misses school. Did they have dental pain? If they showed defiant behavior, was it asthma? The child was sleeping in class, was it food insecurity? If a child is expressing symptoms of anxiety, do they have hearing loss? Or what if a child's refusing to do their work? Maybe they can't see them. So things aren't always what they seem, right? So again, that, the slide back a little bit ago, looking beyond the obvious, taking what you see at face value and going a step further. So thinking about these physical health symptoms that we've talked about, the ways that these things might present in behaviors that look like defiant behavior or depression or anxiety or withdrawal. There is so much talk about mental illness and so much awareness around mental health and mental illness now, I think, as a result of the pandemic, as a result of the AAP, releasing that state of emergency statement. But often we're hearing now a bit of a mix-up, I think, of people thinking mental health and automatically thinking mental illness. But we all have mental health, right? It's something that, just like our physical health, it's on a spectrum. It can change every day. So when we think mental health is our emotions, our thoughts and feelings, the way we socially connect with others. It can affect our ability to solve problems, to overcome everyday obstacles and difficulties, understand how we understand the world around us, right? So that can shift from day to day, what's going on in the world can really affect us, but it's something that everybody has. But mental illness is something that's diagnosable. So that is intrinsically affecting the way we think, the way we feel, the way we behave, how we interact with others. But there are so many different types of mental illnesses that can look very different in many people. Many different symptoms and many different impacts. So what influences physical and mental health? These things are pretty similar. You think back to when you're thinking about being healthy and improving your physical health, they tend to impact your mental health as well. So healthy lifestyle habits, physical wellness or the absence of disease, family support, modeling of healthy behaviors. I also loved hearing that this morning and talking about the way that we as adults act in front of children and the things that we do so that children can model off of us. Same thing applies here for physical and mental health. The environments that we're in, are they safe? Do people have the opportunity to make the healthy choice? Is that the easy choice for kids? And then in instances when needed, is the right medication and therapies being involved in that child's life? Negative contributors, things on the opposite. So brain chemistry, family history, and stress can be large contributors. Unhealthy lifestyles, the presence of physical illness, substance abuse, unsafe environments, traumatic events, all things that are affecting not just our mental health, but our physical health as well, and vice versa. So I like to think about mental health like this on a continuum, and I did not come up with this graphic on my own, but it is a great one. So if you think about being able to recognize these types of behaviors in children. So looking on the far right side, when a child is in crisis, they might be experiencing very anxious behaviors, really low mood, missing school, getting poor sleep, maybe weight loss. And they all just kind of gradually increase as we get to excelling. So when you get to excelling, you're cheerful, you're joyful, energetic, you're performing high. fully realizing your potential, right? But at any given day, these things can shift. I think we can all put ourselves and think about, where are you today on this scale, right? Are you thriving? Are you excelling because you're here in this great environment, being surrounded by people that are doing awesome things? But yesterday, were you in crisis? Were you struggling to get here in a bad traffic situation, or rushing to get out of your house, just kind of in fight or flight mode? So it really shifts. In terms of children and in terms of our health too, it's a continuum. So it's always changing. And we're going to get to a quote, I think, in a little bit, but just to hit it home at the current moment, the more that we know the kids that we're working with, we're able to recognize these things. So if we just see a kid and we see them acting this way, but we don't really know anything about them, how would we know if they're in crisis or if they're thriving, right? So being able to have that connection is so important. And just to be able to recognize that, just like our physical health, our mental health, always on that continuum. So I want to show a little bit of Georgia Student Health Survey data. This is from students in middle school and high school from the previous school year, and it was close to 400,000 students. I can't remember the exact percentage, but again, this past year wasn't mandatory. This upcoming school year will be, but I believe we still had about 60% participation, which is pretty good for not requiring everybody to do it. And I'm thinking these slides are going to be shared after the fact in PDF form, so you can access this. But all of these results are publicly available for every school district in the state. So I got a link down here to it. You can Google Godot Georgia Student Health Survey data and get to this really easily. So when we think about safety, 13% of students report that they never feel safe at school, which may seem low, but still 51,000 kids say that they don't feel that way, which is a little tough to sit with. Over 10,000 students have brought a weapon to school during the past 12 months. So yeah, imagining that environment. I actually just saw something on social media before coming down here that a local school district in the metro Atlanta area was making a rule that all kids had to bring clear backpacks to school because of the number of weapons that had been seized in the school year. Only 51% of students know what to do when there's an emergency at their school. About 6.5% of students reported being offered, sold, or given illegal drugs on school property. Looking at mental health and self-harm, about 16% of students have seriously considered harming themselves on purpose during the last year. And about 11% have harmed themselves on purpose during the last year. Regarding suicide, about 12% have seriously considered attempting, and about 6% have attempted suicide during the past 12 months. 54% of students have reported feeling depressed, sad, or withdrawn, and these are shorter time frames. You'll notice these are within the past 30 days. 15% of students have experienced severely out of control behavior that could hurt themselves or others. And then 30% have experienced drastic changes in their behavior or personality. And when I look at these numbers, I feel a little bit sad, right? These are kind of hard numbers to stick with, that many kids are experiencing these things or saying that they are, is a little tough to sit with. 40% of students have experienced intense anxiety, worries, or fears that interfere with their daily activities in the last 30 days. And about 30% have experienced severe mood swings that have caused problems with their relationships in the last 30 days. Over half of students reported feeling always stressed. And only about 43% of students strongly agree there's an adult at school they can talk to if they need help. Which I think is where a lot of the work that we do in communities and working with schools is not being necessarily educators, but who are those other people in the building, in the community kids can connect with, have a safe place to talk, a safe adult they trust. And so I think that's something that we always will continually be working on, right? Making sure that the students have that trusted person. So we know that we have a lot of opportunity to help kids in this space and be that adult that students need. So this is the quote I was getting to. The single most common factor for children who develop resilience is at least one stable and committed relationship with supportive parent, caregiver, or other adult. All right, so moving kind of into this last section and talking about supports and solutions. So kind of giving you a lot of data, a lot of information to swallow. But when we think about this tiered supports, again, I think that primary prevention is the best thing that schools can do from a health and well-being standpoint. I don't claim to speak for the education space because that is not my job. I think that as a result of the pandemic, to no choice of our own, everything was very reactive, right? We didn't have an opportunity to know what was coming next. We had to just react in the moment. But now that we kind of know where kids are at, what's going on, what types of things have been missed, fallen through the cracks, fallen behind when it comes to their health over the past couple of years, what can we start doing on a preventive measure for all kids and not just waiting until that child shows the behavior that's uncharacteristic and having to go from there, but what if we implemented things for all kids that help to let us know ahead of time that these things were going on, or empower kids to speak up about what was going on with their health or what they were doing. So if anybody's not familiar with this tiered supports model, this is a lot of how education works, thinking about things in tiers. So secondary prevention would then be like a small group setting. Tertiary prevention would be something more individualized, but we're really just going to focus on this primary piece, and I just went through all my slides. Wrong button. Okay, so thinking about this primary prevention piece, I think education is key, right? So comprehensive health education for youth and for adults, is being able to understand these things as adults can help us to communicate these things to kids. So I think this is a lot of what the Health Promotion Research Center at Morehouse is all about, is doing that health education. And then adapting best practices. So modeling those healthy lifestyle habits, providing adequate time and space for movement during the day, giving kids the chance to get up and move around and have free space, whether that's elementary school kids having recess or middle school and high school kids having a break during the day to just be outside. Creating healthy environments where that healthy choice is the easy choice. Encouraging students, if they have one and have access to, getting into well child visits, routine physical and developmental screening. If children are going to the doctor on a regular basis, they're getting screened for their hearing and their vision and their oral health, and not leaving that responsibility on the school. But we know that is definitely not a reality everywhere in Georgia, which is where a lot of this kind of work comes in, and being able to have that support from the community to provide that support to kids, or at least connect them to the right place. And from a policy level, anybody in here familiar with wellness policies? Angie? Anybody else? So wellness policies are actually a requirement of the USDA for every school that participates in the National School Lunch Program. And they are, I would say, much more concentrated. We're talking about in the elementary school space, we're talking about school meals, physical activity requirements, and then there's kind of an other school-based wellness category, but it's something that has just in the past couple of years been acted upon, starting to be reviewed, and the pandemic kind of interrupted that. So we're getting back to a regular process for that. But basically, if you're thinking about things from a policy standpoint, all of the work and programs that schools and community organizations are doing, the wellness policy is a way to kind of write that in for accountability purposes.
Our wellness policy stand out of our school nutrition department right now. That's where we all come together, all different parts of life.
Exactly, and it gives a really great opportunity for that collaboration there. With wellness policies, really encouraged to have outside support from the community, but does tend to fall on school nutrition. So that's something that we're working on internally, is to kind of help broaden the scope of wellness policies beyond that school nutrition space and allow it to be really a whole school district-wide policy that encompasses health and well-being for kids. Protective factors. This is that connectiveness piece. So those relationships with the trusted adult. Adequate concrete supports for parents. So what are we doing in our schools, in our communities, connecting those dots for parents so that they know what's going on, they know what resources they have accessible to them. Process and collaboration, that's a lot more thinking about social and health types of services and the communication that we have with each other to make sure that things don't fall through the cracks for kids. On a more personal level, healthy expression and communication of emotions, and ability to self-regulate. So being able to model those things for youth so that they see that happening, they know they can do it too. So again, I think, this whole, when we talk about whole child, and again, when things have become such buzzwords over the last couple of years, and I think this is definitely one of them. But again, really looking at the core pieces of this framework and recognizing this community piece, that we can't do any of this work without the community wrapping their arms around kids and families.
I have a question.
Sure.
Is this the spectrum for parent engagement? Who makes with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So this was referenced a bit in the video you guys saw earlier. This is our toolkit on health barriers to learning and development. So we put this together after kind of doing a deep dive into what some of these health barriers look like in our communities. I am biased because I helped put it together, but I think it's a very straightforward toolkit that can be used not just by schools, but by anybody in the community as well. It gives examples of screening tools, partners who might want to help with these things, what to do for follow-up situations. So let's say you do a vision and hearing screening, what can you do after that? A child needs classes, a child needs follow-up hearing service. All of that information is in this toolkit in a very easy to digest way. We also have examples at the end of data. So very common, easy to access health data for kids, for counties, for school districts. What is out there of that? Again, to the question that was asked earlier, it's not quite as specific for each of those health barriers that we talked about, but gives a broad understanding of what health outcomes look like for kids and for adults in communities. So there's some good examples of that, and also some kind of guiding language on how to start having these conversations in schools and where to have them, which again can apply to your community organizations as well. Hope Givers is something that was created over the last year in coordination with Georgia Public Broadcasting. It was developed in coordination with the DOE as well, and this is something that's for middle school and high school students right now. There is more coming for younger grades, I think, in the next season. These are all really accessible on GPB, and the great thing about them is that they are on-demand videos, can be watched at any time, and they all have accompanying lesson plans that are aligned to Georgia Standards of Excellence. So they can be used in the classroom, they can be just used to show kids it is youth telling stories, things that they've been through and how they overcame challenges. So it's really kind of a mental health tool. There's great examples of self-care activities and kind of a connection thing for youth to be able to see that overcoming obstacles piece. So this is really, really awesome. I highly recommend checking that out. The Free Your Feels campaign. This is something that was started between Voices for Georgia's Children and the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities about a year and a half ago. And it's still ongoing. This is a great tool for you to work in communities. They have toolkits for all kinds of audiences, for social media, for meetings. And it's all about encouraging youth to speak up about their mental health, to have these conversations and kind of take the taboo away. So again, all of that really accessible. If you're on social media, you can definitely search for them, the hashtag Free Your Feels. It's been a really, really cool movement to see kind of take off over the last year or so. And then partnerships. I imagine, again, that a lot of you are already doing this work, but for our school audiences, sometimes these are not as common things that come to people's minds. So partnerships with schools and child care centers, with local public health departments, technical colleges and universities, civic organizations in the communities like Lions and Rotary, federally qualified health centers, health systems and hospitals, family connection partnerships, and organizations like Safe Kids Georgia that do injury prevention work. And I'd like to close with this. I think this is always an important thing and something that I know was ingrained in our heads in my public health training, but this is the stages of change model. So while it might seem like this is a lot of information to take in, or there are so many different things you can be doing, I think the first step is kind of always evaluating where your population or the community that you're working with is at. Some people might not even be thinking about these things. So if you're in that pre-contemplation stage, where do you even get started? How do you start having these conversations? But maybe you're already doing a lot of great stuff and you're in the maintenance phase. You need to think that continuous improvement cycle of how do we keep getting better at this and how do we keep doing this well? So just remembering that this is also a continuum. You know, you can be anywhere on here at any time. I know we hear in schools really often that there is so much turnover with leadership, and anytime there is new turnover with leadership, things start all over again. So just being able to recognize and give grace to wherever the people that you're working with are at, but knowing that there is kind of always a possibility to move forward and to help our youth out. So that is kind of my closing. I've got, again, links up here to our website and to our Twitter account. The QR code is for a newsletter that we do if anybody is interested. But I will stop there and ask you questions.
My name is Carolyn. Where is the support for teachers? Because I'm always concerned that they're spending the majority part of the day with students, but they've been under stress as well.
Right.
And is there, when you think about the whole child, you also think about the system to support the whole child?
Yes. So that's actually something, I'm glad you brought that up. We've been working on staff wellness resources over the last year, and have really been trying to understand what it is that staff need. And the Department of Education hosted a teacher burnout task force over the last year that was facilitated by the who's now the previous teacher of the year. And they just released a report. If I can find the resource, I will attach it with the slides when I send them along. But basically, they gave suggestions. The UGA helped out with the organization, but they came up with a framework of suggestions and actionable items on how to address teacher burnout, resources for stress, things of that nature, and then actionably how to have those conversations with leadership, with teachers, and with everybody just working together to help try to address those things. So it's coming, but it's a unique spot. I was sitting in a room, part of that burnout task force, with a teacher that was in Savannah Chatham telling me that her school district had taken a day they were supposed to have professional learning, and instead of doing that, they had a wellness day. So the school district organized wellness events across the county, I guess, for people to go to. And the overwhelming response was, well, this was really nice, but it would have been great just to have a day to get work done. Which really kind of gave me pause to try to reevaluate. Yes, we want teachers to have the resources that they need for wellness, but it seems as though there are a lot of underlying things that need to be addressed from that standpoint to help alleviate some of that stress that happens to begin with, which is all what that teacher burnout task force report is about, is how to address those underlying issues so that we don't have to pile on all of these different types of self-care and supports and things that teachers might not necessarily want. So still navigating it. We do have staff wellness resources on the website.
There we also pile on teachers now they're responsible for the child, finding resources for the child. I work in Atlanta. I live in Rancho. And that's primarily what I hear from my teacher is because I think that's
Yeah.
because they had to do so much different stuff and still all this test work pressure still later, right? And things have changed so much so quickly for our teachers. So that's overwhelming. It just takes me.
Focus groups and assessments with adult focus groups. So
choose their own curriculums and programs. So we don't have anything that we necessarily can recommend or that we support over anything else. So all of the decisions. Oh, yeah.
Without a grant, one school has to do two different drugs, relationship smarts. There are a number of programs that could be shared that communities could touch. So like two different drugs. Not too bad. The relationship smarts is the way we help each other, that's our personality, and how we respond differently, but we're on the same team, respect. All those pieces like that to me, were more complicated. A lot of us, those are bricks of mortar and the stones of support that all of the schools and counties need. They really do, and y'all know that.
Yeah.
No, you know. It's big deal. It is.
Yeah, no, for sure. No, it's just, that's the way that the state agency operates. So we wish we could.
We can share.
Yes, the more that you, that's kind of peer sharing is right for that, because you can learn what surrounding districts are doing and having success with.
That's just pennies in the bucket, you know, pennies in the bucket.
And then you can, you know, pick and choose based on what your circumstances are. Because, you know, what we do with your resources, you need X.
Right,
Figure
right.
it somewhere else.
Continue to look and encourage you to have these conversations with folks. Just like she's talking about, you know, there are a lot of other things that work. Everything's not going to be the same.
Share a quick story.
Absolutely.
Just quick story, kind of ties into what we are discussing. Just dealing with my own personal child, young father. So, growing up, my son would go to a ball game. During this ball game, he kept asking me, "What's the score?" Then? What's the score? I would tell him, "Yeah, what's the score?" So man, that big old scoreboard right there in the Coliseum. See that big old score? It's got the score there. And we did 4 minutes. That was the score. You can't see that scoreboard? How about those over there? How about that one right there? Dad, no, I can't see it. I said, "What you mean you can't see it?" "I can't see it." I said, "Man, no, stop playing with me now." "Dad, I can't see it. I don't know what it's doing." Immediately after the game, we go, you know, all that stayed on my mind. So I go back and start making appointments and things like that. Finding resources because they do vision checks at school. They don't go into detail, you know, and I got to a doctor. Once I got to that doctor, you know, at the time I didn't have vision coverage, you know, young father didn't have all of that. And so the Lions Club stepped in. Not only did they pay for the testing, they paid for the glasses, they wrote had contacts, you know, all of this. So the whole child is, you know, it's something that it's been around, but now we're talking. Now we're trying to, you know, gravitate all of these resources. Even with social emotional learning, I had that. I was doing that in school. I like this because it's now including more physical, you know, health instead of just your mental health. Because physical is important, just as important as.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think when I was asked to do this presentation and recently on something else too, can you talk about mental health? Can you talk about mental health? And I said, well, can I talk about physical health too? Because I just feel really strongly that you can't talk about
But like you touched on it, our mental health changes and changes every day. What can happen around you, and that we're always be aware that, oh, I'm not good.
right.
We work closely together, so we know. You know, whether you say it or not.
Yeah.
You know, we know each other.
Right. It's about those relationships.
It's important, you know, that we have a school life, in the workforce, and life, and grocery store. You don't know, that person might have done something that offended you but you don't know where they are, what is happening in their world. And you, that filter of kindness and love, we need to make sure. And even after we find something, I mean, really and truly, it is a big deal if we're constantly finishing our meetings. You talk about exercise, and then you have to go run, you breathe more, also drink water. That's a lot of wellness.
Yeah.
Little ways.
You know, on the note of community connecting, talk a little bit about the mentor program.
I will say I don't know too much about McKinney Vento. That's in a separate division as us. So we don't work too closely with them.
It ties in all of this.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's-
So they all sit in federal programs. And as I said, kind of, this since our office is new, a lot of work we've done in the past 2 years has been really trying to identify what's going on and what we can do. And our next steps are more really trying to integrate with all the other divisions across our agency to help integrate these things. So in a homeless program, in the family engagement program, we work closely with nutrition and health education, but how can we spread it throughout the other things? So that's definitely.
Some meetings meant to asking the right question. And some, you know, it's taboo. You can ask about it to a school nurse. And you can get, to a counselor, which is social worker, and get.
But because that is a federal, sponsor, so to speak, I should say, it ties everything. 'Cause I'm in transportation, so therefore, transportation becomes a huge part of that. Making sure that that child is taken back to where he's comfortable, or she's comfortable. So, that plays a big part. So it's federal, it's a lot more to this local topics.
paying those for, when we were paying for the memorandum with the capacity of coming out for child parent. We were all in this meeting and we decided that what we could explain this and send our proposals up. The question came up of what's the best thing to do. And in the meeting, I said, ask the parents, this is their children. I think it's very important that as we look at policy, as we gauge these assessments, and we ask the children as well as the parents. Because sometimes there's a disconnect with generations where you talk about parents. We get some counselors, some children counselors, some youth counselors to say, okay, what does this look like? And then
And that's a huge part of that wellness policy piece too, is having school health committees, and we hear all the time, we already have exercise committees for things. Maybe you don't need to recreate anymore. Maybe there's some committee that's already working on these things. But having that parent and that student voice is huge, because at the end of the day, that stuff is for them. So you need to have them at the table too to be part of the conversation. Yeah, whole part of it.
If parents are experiencing the problem and do it in these tubes, so they're not intimidated by the system, but they're actually talking about real issues that affect them.
Yeah.
Because there are issues that don't affect me. Should be making that, having that voice for and speaking for that parent. I just always find that almost egregious that, well, I know it. Absolutely, I do not. I know. I know. I don't know what it's like to get kicked out of my house. I don't know what it's like to be sitting with five kids in the room. I don't know what that feels like. So I can't necessarily tell you from a lived experience. I think that lived experience is hugely important.
Not a question, but a share.
Please do. The stories are very important. I appreciate you sharing your story too. It's really helpful.
One of the things that my family engagement specialist, so my parent liaison, I'm in a school. And we were just having a conversation, and one of the things that we both hit upon, and this was April of this year, we had struggled through the entire week with family engagement, and almost like, poof, aha moment. If it's important to the kid, it becomes important to the parent. And we had done a couple of things with the children to get them interested. And I say children, we work in a high school. And it was so important to them that they went home and they talked about it, and they wouldn't shut up about it. So the phone calls started coming. And about the fifth phone call, we were both like, did you talk to someone? Did you hear about? Oh, we need to do this. So we started putting into place the plan for the next school term is that we will hammer it home with these kids. Because when it's important to them, and we're, as adults, when it's important to us, we want to tell everybody about it. So we are going to make it so important and so irresistible to these kids that they're going to go home and not shut up about it, which is in turn going to have the parents contact them. So, and we know it's working. It's actually working. We did the same thing during the summer for our summer school remediation program. And it was like wildfire. So it works. So your kid is your best seller. Yes, because they're not going to let it rest. If it's important to them, they're going to get their parents on board. So everything we could. I mean, you name it. And like I said, food doesn't work. Money doesn't work. It has to be important to them. And you give them a voice. And okay, so what do you think? Okay, so how should we give it? Okay, so what else would you like to see? And these were and just giving them that time. And sometimes it's hard, but you have to make the time. And as far as methodology, like I said, you name it, but mostly for me, I know for me personally, it's just being available. Just being available and talking about it nonstop. Just nonstop. So
My daughter in middle school, a lot of girls are 19. And the teacher said, there's a lot of talking, but every conference it was talking. And it was like, just let them talk. Make it a reward. If you finish this paper, you guys can have the rest of the bell to talk. Those girls we were just so, and it was just, if they have something there, it's all day. They don't see each other outside this. Let them talk. And so that became one of the things to get the girls to be quiet. We will let you talk.
And again, we didn't stumble upon this until April of this school term. Where was this back in October when we really needed these parents? So we got there. We saw that our parent participation numbers were going up. Found that we were actually having real conversations with the parents or the guardian of this kid. We're now looking into whether or not another piece that we're going to look into is there an improvement academically? Is there an improvement behaviorally? We want to know how it's connected. So, in other words, even collect data. So I think it's going to. Yeah. So just take
I was going to think one of the presentation that I enjoyed was I've got some work. So I've never heard of Hope Yet, but
Yeah,
I remember it's already how we had a chance to watch and understand how important that is. So that's coming.
Has to be a high school house rock.
fantastic job. The person behind it is like a award-winning filmmaker. It's local to Georgia. He's from Woodbridge. He started this campaign with GPP and DOE and it's really partners on it. It's really
I'm not close to resource education.
yeah.
And then just a look for the Jordan. They're second now. If you take time to explore all kinds of information, and they're all free. Trying to put them on.
I have a question. I guess this would be towards the entire class. Are you having or are you experiencing problems that are not trauma or coming to school when you're having a hard time? And it's coming out. I was I actually had a father to pour into me why he don't come out. And one of the reasons was he felt like teachers were talking down to him. There was a big time disconnect because of his education wasn't there. And he didn't finish school. So we provided some other resources, you know, get your GED and all that kind of stuff. But it was still the fact that, you know, we had a lot of, and it was mostly a lot of the teachers now. They're so focused on education. Look at the whole child, the whole thing, and part of that is at home. So the father don't come out to school. Parents don't come out to school because they feel that being taught now, or talking to him, you treat me like I'm a child, you know, so they don't come out. And that's been tough, but it's also been kind of hard to deal with some of our teachers trying to understand. So we got to create a different type of atmosphere for them.
I'll share a solution that one of our employees did. They actually kind of copied the program called Focus on You, and Moms on a Mission. And they just got fathers to volunteer. Anybody standing? To greet kids as they got off the bus. They get early and accessible, get off the bus and say, hey, I'm happy to see you. It didn't require a degree. It didn't require education. It meant that I was standing there, I'm here, I believe in you, I expect something from you, and I expect you to have a good day. That was it. It changed the entire culture of the school. And it is, and they didn't do it every day. They did it maybe once a month, and they did it at middle school. And one little girl just, you know, she just said tears, she said, I feel so loved. Because nobody said good morning to me today. Nobody said to me a damn about you today. But somebody I got, and that's not even my dad. And they walked around and stayed around the school. They come in and teach you, so hey, that's grown. And it's done more for the dads as well as the kids who they're greedy. And the moms will be there no matter what. But it gave the dads an opportunity just to be.
This is like part of the father initiative. So these two so with that, we have these different sections where we address conflicts going on and to communicate parenting, the education to the parent and the child. So part of the initiative. That's what we do. So to expand these resources, expand skill sets. And so helping you recover actually as we want to have the problem is that she's for that. So initiative.
Well, thanks everybody for your questions and discussion. That's always a hope after a presentation that people want to talk. So thanks for your attention. I really appreciate it. Carol, I'm sorry. I used to work in the so yeah, I was Leslie all the time. So where's the sharing things on I guys are working with the new world now. What are those things? I saw your thing, like, when you went to last night, like, stay with that. I will, no, I be able to, honestly, this is new, this is still in.
And I gotta look that up. It was good. It was
I was like, I wonder if you ever get so next to the year, always gonna put things. Yeah. Oh my goodness, I'm sorry that.
like I made another story.
Are you guys, so the letter of support, is that for continuation of the injury? Yes. Right.
This is mine.
Yeah.
We are our own nonprofit. So.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'm happy to help collaborate, and I will say, and she's so I'm kind of like feeling in some of her duties until that was filled. Once that person gets on board, I'll make sure that, but for now, yeah.
Y'all have three of those, but there's just two, phase one.
Yeah. Yeah.
If this is perfect. Yeah,